Sunday morning, I woke up and started getting ready for church when all of a sudden I checked the time and realized I woke up late. Then I remembered that it was that time of year to change our clocks forward an hour. I'm sure many of you at one point or another have also forgotten to change your clocks and were late to either school or work. I'll be talking about how daylight savings was established, the purpose of daylight savings, and the effects. I've always been curious about this topic, but have never known the reason for time change until now. Today I want to explain for you the purpose of daylight savings. The first thing I would like to explain to you is how daylight savings was established. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers and a great inventor, was awakened early one morning before his usual time and was surprised to see that the sun was out early. Due to his shock, he decided to check the next couple of days and found that the sun did rise early every day. He thought of how many candles would be saved if people woke up earlier. As a result of his assumption, he was the first to conceive daylight savings. Although Benjamin Franklin was the first to consider the idea of changing time, William Willett, a British builder, was the first to propose the change. He fought for years to introduce DST to Britain, but he died before he got to see the outcome. Years after William Willett's death, DST was finally adopted by Germany, then Britain, and eventually traveled to America due to World War I. Daylight replaced artificial lightning and the fuel for the war. Not only was DST helpful for lighting and fuel, but also for the railroads. According to Jennifer Vernon, a National Geographic news reporter, the railroad industry established time change so the railroad schedules could be published. Now that the railroads had a set time in each state, they were able to arrive at their destination on time. The time change was eventually used by more countries. This chart shows all the countries and the different time zones in each country. So if for us it's 4 o'clock right here, then in, let's say, Europe, it'll be 2 o'clock at night, or p.m. Okay. Now that I have given you a brief background on daylight savings, I'd like to tell you the purpose of daylight savings. The objective is to conserve energy and get better use of daylight. Studies done by the U.S. Department of Transportation in 1975 showed that daylight savings cuts down the usage of electricity by 1% each day because less electricity is being used for appliances and lighting. 1% is not a huge amount, but it's still a significant amount. This slide here shows the percentage of electricity being used for commercial industries, residential, industrial, and also transportation. You can see that the commercial is the highest because they use more electricity than all the other industries. Power companies have also found that power usage decreases about 3.5% when daylight savings starts, which helps conserve more energy. Most of the energy consumption occurs in the evening when families are at home and use their appliances. This chart here shows the percentage used by each product. So for residential, it's the heating and hot water, which is the highest, 21%. And then for offices and transportation and the other industries too. By moving the clock forward an hour, the energy consumed will decrease. I've explained to you the purpose of daylight savings, and now I will tell you the effects. Several studies in the U.S. and Great Britain have found that the DST daylight shift reduces traffic accidents in the summer due to the time change. However, during the fall, the percent of traffic accidents increases because of the clock being turned back an hour, which makes it darker earlier and more accidents. This here shows the time where it's the most dangerous to drive, which is after 7 p.m. and before 7 a.m. because it's the darkest. This causes more accidents for people because they can't see. In addition to the traffic accidents, daylight saving time also increases the risk of heart attacks. Charlotte Lebeau, a Miami health examiner, states that the time change causes major effects on the heart because we lose an hour of sleep each night until we adjust to the time change. Daylight savings is also known to prevent crime because people get home from school or work and complete errands in the daylight. Daylight saving time reduces people's exposure to various crimes. A 1970s study found that crime in Washington, D.C. dropped about 10% when the extra hour of daylight was added, most likely because dusk is a high crime time, the Washington Post reported. And the biggest downside of the time change may be for the airlines, which have difficulty matching schedules with foreign airports. Today I've talked about how daylight savings was conceived, the purpose of daylight savings, and the effects. I hope all of you have a better understanding of daylight savings now. Remember, spring forward and fall back.
Jerome, you here?
Yeah.
Let's hear from you.
I thought she was clear and informative. I like how there's like a lot of statistical data and the pictures she showed. I think they were effective for her presentation. But at times it sounded kind of scripted and she kind of just read off her speech. But besides that, I thought she had good eye contact and she was pretty loud and clear.
All right. I think you picked out something that I would have pointed out as well, and that is that the presentation, I think, is undermined a little bit by its, the way the script is, and you're just given basic information. There aren't any personal touches, there aren't any examples, there aren't any stories, and as a consequence, it sounds a little bit like a lecture that hasn't been fleshed out. You need to add a little personality to it to make it more interesting. But you did have a very good structure. You did have good information. I like the citation that you had of information. You're pretty consistent about that. The explanations of each of those points, for instance, that you had about the heart attacks or the traffic, I thought those were fine. Those would be perfect examples, for instance, where a story or an anecdote, some kind of example would be useful and might make it a little bit more personable and involving. The visual materials, I thought most of them were solid. There were 2 or 3 things that I think were a little problematic. The pie chart's a little bit small, and there's an energy usage graph that you've got there. And I'm trying to figure out how we get any information about the energy savings from the one graph. The one where you pointed out how the time change affects the lighting and how that creates a difference in accident rates. That I thought was more clearly explained on the visual image. The other 2 that I just mentioned, it wasn't really clear how it was related to daylight savings times. It was just information about those particular issues. And the delivery is a little script dependent, and I think you could get more out of it if you worked at it. All right, thank you.